Windows Longhorn, a weird, glitchy, and ambitious part of Microsoft history, is the version of Windows that was supposed to come after XP, but kinda never made it. Windows Longhorn is probably the coolest operating system you're never supposed to use. It had a sidebar, glass windows, futuristic file systems, but it completely fell apart before it could even launch. After Windows XP dropped in 2001, Microsoft was flying high. They needed a follow-up that would outdo it in every way. The codename was Longhorn. It was supposed to bridge the gap between XP and something called Blackcomb, which would come later. But Longhorn got too big, too bloated, and eventually Microsoft had to scrap almost the entire thing and start over from scratch. The result of that reset? Windows Vista. But let's go back to Longhorn before the crash. Longhorn was packed with ideas. It wasn't just a new coat of paint, it was trying to reinvent how Windows worked. Some of its key features were a brand new design language called Arrow, a sidebar with live widgets, animated translucent UI, and the biggest change yet, WinFS, a completely new file system built on top of NTFS that lets you tag and search your files like a database. Basically, they were trying to make Windows look like macOS, act like a web browser, and run like a spaceship. But it was 2003. Alright, so here we are on the desktop of Windows codename Longhorn, and this is the build 4074, which to my knowledge was released in, well, not released, it was compiled in May of 2004. And we can see it has a pretty futuristic design, if I say so. It's quite interesting. It's not quite Vista. Well, this is a build before the reset, obviously, but it's not really Windows XP either. We can already see from this icon. It's this kind of new Vista one. I don't know if this is the final icon that made it to Windows Vista, but it looks way different from the Windows XP one. Just by looking at this and like opening a window, we can see this looks way ahead of its time. For 2004, this looks actually really good. A problem I have with VMware right now is that I could not install the VMware tools, so there will be no graphical acceleration, so no arrow, no transparency, none of that, but we can imagine it's here. So basically this was the selling point for Longhorn, this futuristic transparent arrow look, this theme. There were more themes included in this build, which won't really work because I don't have graphical acceleration on, but that doesn't matter, we can still kind of see them. The default one is Arrow, which kind of looks like this. The next one is Jade, which is kind of actually basically the same thing. And this is Slate, which at this point kind of reminds me of Windows XP with a facelift, if that makes any sense. And obviously the Windows Classic, but we don't really like that. Windows Arrow is still probably the best one for Windows Longhorn. There were even more desktop backgrounds. Some of them were remnants from Windows XP, some of them were new. Here on the right we have the sidebar, which is pretty bugged. This slideshow doesn't really work. If I click on it, it goes to black, and then if I click again, it shows a picture. But there are more gadgets that we can show, like contacts, which, oh, I guess they work if I had contacts on here, but I don't think I will put any. There's stuff like the news feed, people nearby. That's interesting, that's kind of scary actually. One thing I really like in this build is this calendar. I love these pictures. I don't know why. This picture reminds me of somewhere, but I don't know. This picture looks really known to me. I feel like I know it from somewhere, but I don't know exactly. The start menu is kind of Windows XP-ish, but we can see it's a bit thinner and we don't have the user part here at the top. Apparently this build included a 3D app switcher as well, but I could not get it to work, probably because I don't have the VMware tools installed. So yeah, I'll probably just put a picture of it up here. Yeah, looks nice, really nice. Obviously a selling point of Windows Longhorn was WinFS, which pretty obviously does not work in this build. So like if I go to documents and I create a WordPad document, let's see if it works. Yeah, it's dead. sad. I wanted to see if it can find anything, but doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like even it wants to create a document to be able to find one. So we're just gonna have to trust that WinFS was going to be a thing, but it failed. And other than these key features, it is basically just Windows XP. Most apps look the same icons, nothing really changed. As per games, they're the Windows XP one. Kind of sad we can't see like an older version, beta version of Purple Place, because that was my favorite game in Windows Vista and Windows 7. Obviously stuff like Windows Explorer is not going to work, no way it's gonna ever work again, which I quite like this version of Windows Explorer. If Longhorn would have been a thing, I would have used this. Honestly, 100% I would have used this. If Windows Longhorn was more optimized than it ever was and the reset didn't happen and it was released like this, I think a lot of people would have liked it. Something that I noticed is that the sidebar can drop down. Basically you have the full desktop, which if for example something was open, yeah, now it's on full screen, but with the sidebar opened it's pretty limited, which the sidebar showing at any moment is kind of a stupid decision, because who would want to section off their screen almost into half, yeah. Anyway, this thing barely runs, but it is indeed a gorgeous mess. I honestly really like this. Even installing it was a pain in the ass. Even VMware hates this thing, so does my laptop, but don't worry, I managed to get it working. Eventually, Longhorn collapsed under its own weight. The builds kept getting slower, features didn't work, security was a mess, and devs couldn't keep up with all the layers of complexity. In 2004, Microsoft hit the panic button. They threw the entire project away and started over with a new codebase. Most of what made Longhorn got deleted. WinFS died, the sidebar got nerfed, Aero got simpler, and the end result was Windows Vista. Yeah, Vista gets clowned on, but it was basically the toned down working version of Longhorn. Here's the thing, Longhorn still inspired the future of Windows. Some of Longhorn's coolest ideas made it into Vista and later into Windows 7. Aero Glass lived on, the sidebar became gadgets, the visual flair set the tone for modern Windows. And some ideas like WinFS never fully happened, but they did influence search in Windows, OneDrive, and even stuff like the Windows Indexer. Plus, Longhorn helped Microsoft realize that maybe shipping an OS should be like organized. And in a way, it's cool that this weird, broken, overly ambitious system ever existed at all. Windows Longhorn didn't fail because it was bad. It fell because it tried to do too much, too soon.